Okay. Andy, are you guys ready?
We are, yes, ma'am.
Good. Okay, call the meeting to order. Stand for the pledge. One nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll begin with approval of the agenda. Yeah, thank you.
Madam President, I move that we approve the agenda with the following amendments. Additional certified classified personnel actions is presented, item E3. And secondly, additional executive session for personnel matters of non-elected personnel, item J2.
Second, any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. And we'll move on to recognition of forensic students.
Good evening. We're back. Tonight we finished the forensic season up at the state tournament in May. Finished 8th as a team out of the 25 or 6A schools that were competing. And I wanted tonight to just kind of recognize the kids who qualified for national events and the students who competed or qualified for state events. And some of those state finalists, semifinalists. So it's been one of the things that I do want to say about this team before I think I'm going to let them introduce themselves. They're forensic students. That'll work, right? When we came out of the COVID year, so we had a year where forensic season ended at spring break. Right, we just didn't do anything else the rest of that year. And then the next year, everything was online. And coming out of the end of that year, we had to do some, we weren't alone. Programs all over the nation had to do some pretty massive rebuilding. Kids didn't enjoy online versions of that exclusively. And so it was harder. And so it felt like this year that we were beginning to kind of get our stride back again. And this group of kids has worked incredibly hard. I do want to say thank you to you all for supporting us as we've gone through all of those iterations of that, for supporting us with coaching staff and resources and all the things that we need. Three of my assistant coaches are here tonight. One of them is not. Dana Johnson has been my assistant coach the longest of the group. She does forensics. Elizabeth Nadamas and Amy Brandt have both been with us since we came out of the COVID year. So they started right after that. This program works in a large part because they helped me make it work. The assistant coach who's not here tonight, I want to mention because at the last of our national qualifying tournaments this year, Alonzo Pena was recognized as the West Kansas NSDA Assistant Coach of the Year. And Alonzo does amazing work and is at some point in what I hope is a really long career going to make an incredible educator. So I want to say thanks to them. I'm going to let you introduce yourselves. You're just going to step up and then you can step back. What I'd like you to do, we didn't rehearse. I want you to tell the board members your name, the events you competed in, and if you what you qualified for and what your biggest accomplishment was this season. Okay, so those of you who qualified for both NSDA and or Nighthawk, mention that, okay?
My name is Kira Roth. I qualified for 3 events this year, Extemp, Impromptu, and Poi. I ended up taking Extemp and Impromptu to state. I qualified there, and then I also qualified for the national tournament later next week. And I think that my biggest accomplishment this year is probably just watching the team really come back and start to get really strong again. And I'm excited to see what they'll do.
Hi, my name's Jordan Humphreys. I qualified in Poi, and I think my biggest accomplishment this year was getting to semifinals at state, which is the farthest I've gone so far.
Hi, my name is Benjamin Mahoney. I qualified for state in both informative and impromptu. I competed in both of those events at State Festival, and I'd say my biggest accomplishment for this year was probably just the fact that I got to ramble on about Legos like a nerd for the entirety of the semester.
Hi, my name is Courtney Nealand. I qualified for poetry and Poi, but only ended up taking poetry to state. And my biggest accomplishment this year was probably learning how to build and reconstruct Pois to get across the message that I wanted to tell people.
Hi, my name is Savemore Yamakope, and I qualified in duo and DI. And I qualified for a night talk tournament in DI. And then I also qualified for NSDA nationals in duo. And my biggest accomplishment this year was having fun with my friends. My name is Emma Vanuel. I qualified in duo and HI, and then I qualified for nationals in duo with Sevi. And then my biggest accomplishment this year is probably getting to nationals with my duo.
Hey, my name is Julia Facio. I competed in HI and duo with my duo partner Kaylin, who unfortunately could not be here today. I'd say my biggest accomplishment was getting 6th at state in duo.
Hi, I'm Christy Donovan, and I qualified in poetry and duo. Unfortunately, my duo partner is not here, but I would say my biggest accomplishment is getting this far with all the things I had along with this.
I'm Jackson Kingston, and I qualified in duet, and we were going to do it at State Festival, but my partner wasn't able to be there. And my biggest accomplishment was probably getting my partner to actually participate.
My name is Pierre Madlang-Bayan. I qualified for both Poi and poetry. I ended up taking both to state. I'd say my biggest accomplishment was placing 2nd in the poetry event and making it to semifinals in the Poi. And I'm just proud that I took really big risks in both my events.
Clarification of forensics nerd speak. Poi means Program of World Inter. That's a collection of things that they put together to build a program. Out of this group, there were, we will be taking, along with the debate team, 7 kids to the nationals in Mesa next week. We're supposed to leave on Friday. We had another 4 or 5 students qualify for the National Individual Events Tournament of Champions tournament. That would have been graduation. That was graduation weekend, and we chose not to go. It was going to be a rough turnaround, and so it's just a weekend tournament. So we decided to opt out of that this year. But this is the forensics team, and this represents hours and hours and hours of work. And I'm just awfully proud of the kids. So thank you for your continued support of Lions and those things.
Questions or comments before we shake their hands?
Yeah, ask them questions.
Well, anytime you compete at a local, state, and national level, hats off to you for sure. And competitive spirit, but also getting to grow with your peers and your friends is It's special, so you need to enjoy it.
Congratulations. Congratulations, ladies. Congratulations.
I go.
Coming in straight down. Great job. Good job.
Brown, y'all got that? Working with my partner, man. Gotta get that guy going.
Hey, and I've never gotten a job in forensics. Maybe you'll forget by next year.
Maybe. I'll tell Dana, she'll.
Okay. I know, okay. I'll set it on the table, but I'll keep trying.
We're ready for the consent agenda.
Madam President, I move that we approve the consent agenda as printed.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any questions or discussion? All in favor? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Our first board goals update.
You guys can come on up. You don't have to be shy. It's okay. So, last year, I met with the group to talk about our plans to look at closing some of our self-contained classrooms. And so I know there was some questions and I was asked to come back and kind of share kind of how the year went and kind of give the board a little overview of how things went. And so, I'm going to do that. And then I've got Brandy and David here to kind of talk about, they had probably the largest number of kiddos that ended up being reintegrated back into the classrooms. And so they're going to kind of talk about successes and the struggles that they saw with that this year. So just to kind of go over what that looked like last summer when we visited, we were looking at closing 7 self-contained classrooms. We had 3 at Edith Sharman, 3 at Alta Brown, and then 1 at Florence Wilson. We were going to open 2 LEAP classrooms, which are life skills classrooms for the kiddos that maybe weren't ready to go. They weren't able to go back because of their disabilities and their needs being so significant. They went into the LEAP classrooms, and we housed those at Alta Brown. And then the majority of the kiddos transitioned back to the general education classrooms. 79 students in total encompass those 7 classrooms that we're talking about. So the students impacted, 20 of those students we moved into the LEAP classrooms, the life skills classrooms at Alta Brown. 7 of those kiddos we transitioned to PKI, which is our progressive kindergarten classroom at Florence Wilson. And then 47 of those students were integrated back into the general education classroom. And 6 kiddos actually moved out of the district before we got started. So kind of gives you an idea of what that looked like. So throughout the year, kind of as we started, we found that some of the kiddos that we moved into the PKI classroom at Florence Wilson, that really wasn't the right setting for them. And so they transitioned from PKI into the LEAP classroom. And so we ended up moving some of those kiddos out of PKI into LEAP. 4 of those kiddos we had to move. And then 1 kiddo that we had in the LEAP room actually needed to go to VO and go to the RISE room because significant needs, they were even more significant. Good news is, of those kiddos that we transitioned, 4 of those kiddos, when we did the reevaluation this year, they no longer qualified for special education. So they were dismissed completely from special education and were able to go without any support as the year started. So that kind of gives you a little look of what that looks like. So some of the data Looking at the behavior data that we tried to collect. So for the 21-22 school year, we had 154 positive referrals, 3 major behavior referrals, and 56 minor referrals. And then for the 22-23 school year, 80 positive referrals, once again, 3 major referrals and 52 minor referrals. So really the only significant difference was in the positive referrals. And going back and visiting with Tammy a little bit about it, we had one of our self-contained teachers that did a lot of positive referrals for her kiddos, and she's no longer in the classroom. So I think that's probably where you see the difference with the positive referrals, but was pleased to see that behavior referrals overall were pretty consistent from one year to the next. FastBridge data. So when the kiddos were in the self-contained classrooms, we didn't collect any FastBridge data on them because of the makeup of the classroom. And so there was no FastBridge data to report from the 21-22 school year. But looking at this year, so this is kindergarten, and I gotta look over here. So on the left would be early reading, and on the right would be the early math. And so you have fall and spring scores. And so you can see we had 9 kindergartners that were there, and of the 9 kindergartners, 1 was not tested. I would assume that kiddo was probably in the leave classroom, and that's why he wasn't tested. But looking at that, scores look pretty good. We had half of our kiddos that were low risk, and then obviously half were high risk to start the year, and then the same thing with math. And so data wise, I felt like our kids did pretty well entering kindergarten, had the academic background for kindergarten. This would be first grade, the same thing. We had 8 first graders there, and so obviously a little bit higher risk there, as you see in the red, but thinking that these kiddos all come from the self-contained classroom, the fact that we're seeing some kids with low risk or some risk versus being all high risk, I think is encouraging data for sure. And then this would be the second grade group. Second grade was really exciting for me because if you look at the far right there, we've got some kiddos in A math and then in the CBM for math that we're actually doing the college pathway that's the highest that they can score on the FastBridge. So we have a lot of red there and obviously some areas that we need to be concerned with, but a lot of our kiddos were seeing some really good successes. So that was promising for sure. And then this would be third grade, and third grade, obviously, we had more kiddos that were showing up in the at-risk area. But something I think that's important to think about here too is when we look at our third and fourth graders, that data doesn't look quite as promising, but those kiddos had been in a self-contained classroom for 2 and 3 years where they weren't getting exposed to the general curriculum and weren't having access to. I mean, they were getting the regular curriculum, but it was slowed down substantially and modified a lot for them. And so I would expect that they wouldn't perform as high as the younger grades would. And then this would be our fourth grade scores. And once again, like I said, you're going to see some higher at-risk scores, but we still had quite a few kids that were low risk, and 1 kiddo in the fall that was in the college pathway for the CDM for math. So yes, sir.
FastBridge, those kids that were in the self-contained never saw FastBridge.
Correct.
So new data for them.
New data for them. Yes, sir. Right, Tammy?
Yeah.
Yeah. We historically haven't done that in the past. And that really is all the data that I have. Are there questions before I guess I'll let David kind of speak to his kiddos and Brandy too of what that looked like for them as they transitioned.
Okay. I have a bulleted list, and I've always been a big proponent of least restrictive environment, and I really think that what happened to Gertrude Walker shows that it's a positive move to start in least restrictive, or at least put students in the least restrictive environment. So we had 6. And one of those 6 ended up needing a more restrictive placement in a behavior classroom to help with his behaviors. We had 1 kindergarten student, 4 first grade, and 1 third grade. Only one of those students still qualifies for extended school year, which is summer school special education. And you qualify for that if we look at if they're able to retain the learning that they've done throughout the year. So only 1 still qualified for that. 4 out of 5 students made progress in all their goals. 1 student met 2 of his 3 goals by April, and his services were adjusted from the resource room to the classroom and math. And the DLM, which is the assessment that most self-contained students take, it's an alternate assessment, was changed to take the general assessment with accommodations. 1 student was exited from special education. She increased 8 points from fall to spring in reading on Fast Bridge. And her math showed aggressive growth with an increase of 46 points. And she's only 4 points below the spring target. 1 student was exited from speech and language. And then again, 1 student did need, out of those 6, he did need a more restrictive placement. So that's what happened to Gertrude Walker.
So we started the school year off with about 10 or 11 of our students that were self-contained prior, but now we're going to resource. Luckily, a lot of our students that were self-contained the last 4 years, a lot of them stayed in our building either because they were in our boundary or we had some parent requests that they wanted to stay at Edith Sharman. And so I think that helped with the transition because they knew our building, they knew our staff, we knew their needs. So for us, the transition was pretty smooth. I think we had a couple of students, we had 2 students in particular that once we saw them in regular ed all day with resource support, you could quickly see that transition probably should have happened even sooner. Even with us trying to always be least restrictive and moving kids as much as we could, once they were in that environment, they were doing so well with the resource support. We did have 1 student that we noticed was struggling with the behavior. He was in a very large classroom that was full capacity and some behaviors were spiking, but we created a behavior intervention plan and the resource teachers and the classroom teachers and the para support implemented that beautifully. And with that support, the student began to continue to be successful in that regular ed room. So at times we increased support through resource services, and at other times we didn't need to increase support. In fact, we have some students where we took away some of the support that was in there once we met with the IEP and looked at the data. I think for me, the biggest success has been seeing that all of these students are in regular ed. They're doing the same curriculum as all the other students. They're taking the same assessments with support and accommodations, and they're able to do it and do it well. They're taking on leadership responsibilities in the building, and that's exciting to see. And I just think that overall, a lot of the growth that we've seen, you can't necessarily see in data, but you see when they're interacting with their peers and their teachers, when they're responding to questions in written and oral form, that's success. And I see that all the time in the classroom. And for us, it's been a great transition, and I'm really proud of those students and as well as the teachers. I do think that as we continue to move forward, training teachers on specific things like autism is a big one. I think that we do need to continue to support the teachers and supporting these students. But overall, working as a team, it's been a great transition for our kids.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the biggest, I think, takeaway that what Brandy said there at the end is, I think, putting that training together, that's where I'm really hopeful that some of the stuff that we get with Dr. Scott coming and working on behavior, I think that'll lend itself, because a lot of the things that he does is he talks a lot about that and de-escalating kids and before they get completely escalated and strategies to work on that. So I'm hopeful that will give them some tools in their toolbox. And then getting our autism team more actively involved in some of those kiddos to support them so that they've got the resources the teachers need to help them. But you know, we definitely had some speed bumps too. I mean, I think we saw some kiddos that I think in the beginning really struggled, but I think our behavior consultants and our school psychs did a really good job of trying to develop some tips that would be successful for them. And I know Suzette and I have talked a lot about the kiddos that she had at Plymel, and Just getting them to be more comfortable working independently, I think, was a struggle with them in the beginning, because they had so much support in the past that you know, they struggled with doing some of that work independently and working through that. But I think as the year progressed, they've done really well. We've seen some pretty good results. Questions?
It's great to hear the successes. It's what we're shooting for. Very often, particularly with this set of students, and in those classrooms, there's sort of a preponderance of trade-offs. You move a bunch of kids, or maybe just 2 or 3 as a bunch in a particular classroom, it really affects the dynamics of the classroom.
Sure.
So it sounds like in one respect, you provided resources, I think was the word used, resource support. Now that's a para, is that what, am I interpreting that correctly?
So when they go to the resource room, so they're part of their day, they will still get pulled out to work in small groups or work individually with a special ed teacher. So that's what the resource setting would be. So moving out of the self-contained classroom and into the general ed classroom, there are 2 primary service delivery models that are going to be CWC, which is a class within a class. That's where a para or the special education teacher is going to go into the classroom to provide that support for the kiddo for whatever amount of time their IEP dictates. And then some of the time they may go to the resource room, which is the special education teacher's classroom, to work in either small groups or individually with that teacher, or it could be the para, depending on scheduling and the needs of the kiddo.
We did hire significantly more paras to help with that kind of support model.
So we didn't necessarily hire more paras. We took the paras that we had all those positions in the self-contained classrooms, and I spread them out based on the numbers and where the need was. And we do that every year, Mark. We meet with all the principals in April and do program planning. So we kind of look at, okay, these are the kiddos that you've got coming up with the needs that they have. And so we talk about moving staff around. And so we move para positions around. I've actually had to move a few teaching positions around this year to different buildings to meet the needs of the buildings where they are. David and Brandy both had two resource teachers in their buildings because their numbers were so high. Now David's going to go down to 1 because minute wise, we can't justify having 2 teachers in his building. So we're going to go back to 1 sped teacher in his building. Brandy went from 2 to 1.5. And so she'll share with another building a part-time teacher. And so, and then we move the paras the same way. And we discovered all that through program planning that we did in April with everybody.
And autism you mentioned, it's a significant deal.
Mm-hmm.
There's a spectrum and et cetera. And I think we've had a wonderful structure in trying to address that. We've had the autism teams. I understand the autism teams may be paid positions now.
Yeah, so next year will be the first year that's going to be paid positions. So,
which I think is great because there's a lot of donation of time.
Yeah,
those people
absolutely.
put in, and, you know, they just deserve a big attaboy. So I think that's appropriate. We certainly need them. So, and then there's just the coordination between the autism teams and the rest of the sped resources and classroom teachers and that kind of thing. So, and so I think that's great. That's all improvements too.
One of the things that the autism team is going to be doing this next year is we're going to be providing training for teachers. We're starting in July with a structured teach class. It's going to be an all-day classroom. And so we'll be offering that to our teachers, any teachers that want to come, but especially to our RISE teachers, our LEAP teachers, and anybody else that wants to come and learn about it. We also have some plans for doing some extra training about once a month, where we'll do it after school.
Oh, that's great. I mean, we have such great expertise. The only thing that can fall apart is communication. And so you know, the efforts you're making, I applaud. Those are great. Autism team paid, make sure there's, you know, because autism team may come become aware of a child, that already you've got a lot of experience and expertise in the classroom. And so it's a real collaboration. As long as we don't get into some kind of a hierarchy where this person has the say, sped teacher, final say. I don't know how you do that ultimately, but as long as there's a good collaboration, I think it's exciting.
Yeah, I think.
There is a really good collaboration. Yeah, we experienced that this year with one of ours that was struggling behaviorally, and the autistic team came out as a big support. And we all collaborated together. It wasn't one person saying one thing, it was just all problem solving on how best to.
And I feel like that's definitely a strength that in the sped department, brainstorming, Tracy talks about that all the time, and that's like her favorite thing to do is to kind of sit down and just let's do some brainstorming and come up with some ideas that we can put in place to support kiddos. And so,
And the data.
yeah,
We keep talking about data-driven decisions. That I feel versus here's the exact specific things happening and cause and effect. I think that's great too. So.
yeah. And I will say that one of the things that we did, one of the positions through program planning is we have moved one of the teaching positions over to Alton Brown so that we are going to have a third leap room, just because Melanie just keeps having kiddos at Garfield. The number of kids that have significant needs at Garfield has just, since I've left, I've only been gone, 4 years, 5 years, and we went from one rise room at Garfield when I was there to, we have three classrooms now, and they're all full. And so those kiddos are gonna have to go into the next level at some point. And so not all of them are gonna need the rise room at the elementary level, so the leap room. And so we've seen a pretty big increase.
Of course, there's plenty of space for that addition.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I don't know how you do
Packing them
it.
in.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Stack them and tack them.
we've got to, not our success, just invites folks in participation
Sure.
and that brings numbers.
Yeah.
At some point, we just got to look at a second early childhood building, I think. I don't know how you guys do it.
Yes, I think that would be very helpful. Thank you for that information.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Lots of 2028 graduation requirements change. Mr. Norby and company.
Hey.
Right. Okay, so last fall, when I did the graduation rate presentation for the high school, I kind of mentioned this was coming. This was going to be State Board of Education at that time was considering potentially changing the graduation requirements. And that did happen. So we're here to give you kind of an update on what those look like today. I don't think we're asking, Jason, I don't think we're asking for any action or anything. We're just giving you an update on what the committee that was tasked to kind of take a look at them. And so I'm here, Lucas and Kathleen, as the heads of the 3 diploma granting institutions here in Garden City. Just want to kind of brief you on what we've been doing. So currently, these are the graduation requirements at our different institutions. The areas that are colored yellow for Garden City High School are areas that we go above and beyond the state requirements. For instance, English language arts and oral communications, according to the state requirements, they're all bundled up together under language arts. And only 4 credits is required, whereas at Garden City High School, that totals up to 4.5. We also have the half credit of computer technology. And then we have, and it cut off there at the bottom, but we've got 8 electives in our current 24 credits where the state requirements are 6. What's at Achieve and Virtual for their graduation requirements are right in line with the state's 21 credit graduation requirements. So that's where we're at right now. In November of last year, the State Board of Ed did adopt a new set of requirements and made it retroactive or active for what was last year's current 7th graders, this year's current, upcoming year's current 8th grader. So it'll be the class of 2028. And so we put a committee together with different members, and some of them are cut off there on the screen, but and we met 4 different times through the year to take a look at what the state recommendations were, take a look at where we currently stand with our graduation requirements, and then come up with some recommendations that we can talk to you about as far as what to do as far as changing or altering our graduation requirements. And so, as I said, we met 4 times, and what we'll present to you is kind of the product of that work. So back to the state, the changes by subject. In the present system, there's 4 units of English language arts that involve all communications. And in the new sets, that is split out so that communications is a requirement. It's not something where someone could potentially in a school district graduate with just 4 credits of language arts and no speech. Now, at least a half a credit of speech is a requirement. History and government, there were no changes. As far as history, government, and fine arts, there's still 3 credits of social studies and 1 full credit of fine arts, which could include music, dance, theater, any of those. A big change is going to be in science and mathematics. Under the old requirements, there were 3 units of science that were required and 3 units of math. Now, what was 6 units is now 7 because the State Board of Education has added 1 unit, 2 semester classes of STEM. Now that can take a lot of different forms, and we're still waiting for some clarifications about exactly what those forms are going to be, because as you can see on there, that includes a lot of things: computer science, advanced math, advanced science, robotics, advanced career and tech ed, advanced technology, agriculture. There hasn't been a lot of guidance on what exactly does advanced science mean. And that may come down to local control. We get to decide what advanced science is, for instance. We're waiting on some more guidance from the State Department and the Board of Education about what some of those things really are. And what really counts there. There is computer science. Well, we already require at Garden City High School a half credit of computer science. Is that going to count towards that, or does it have to be a certain level of computer science? Not really sure on some of that, waiting for some guidance on that. Another change is going to be under what the state now calls employability and life skills. What used to be just a credit of PE and 6 units of electives as part of the minimum 21 credits is going to be half credit of PE, half credit of health. We already have those at Garden City High School, and you already have those at the other schools. But now a semester-long half credit course of financial literacy becomes a graduation requirement. And then because of the extra financial literacy class and the extra 1 full credit of STEM, it's cut off on this screen, but I think you guys may have it. That decreases the elective options from 6 credits on a 21 credit graduation to 4.5. So those are the big changes, is the addition of STEM and the addition of the financial literacy. And so we're starting to take a look at then, how does that look in our schools? How will Lucas and Kathleen take care of the financial literacy class in their schools? How will we do it at Garden City High School? For all of our kids in a class to take financial literacy, that's 19 sections of financial literacy I've got to come up with and find some teachers who are able to teach it. So that's a big thing for us to try to adjust to. I know that they're adding financial literacy courses at the middle schools, which is something that can be a little bit of concerning because we really haven't had a conversation about what they're going to be teaching, what they're going to be doing. how does that lead into what we're doing at high school? So we've got some work to do. Got some work to do there.
Questions?
Yep.
So curriculum development is involved there, right?
Yep.
So there's gonna be presumably a process of collaboration and then presentation of the curriculum council, et cetera, et cetera.
There could be for some of it. I think we'll talk more about financial literacy and what are options that we might want to bring to you and kind of recommend, but there potentially could be. And there could be some expense involved for the district in extra licenses towards financial literacy, the financial literacy course that we currently offer. We just have to offer a whole lot more.
Reason why I asked that is that there are some basics there that kind of wonder to what extent you really need any expensive curriculum.
Yeah.
The basic stuff is what we've heard. We'll make sure the kids can count change, or I say young adults really is what I mean to say.
Yep.
All keep their own personal finances, things like that.
And that's what we try to teach kids, I think, and we'll talk about more is how to teach kids how to be good consumers, debt, credit cards, and those kind of things. Yeah. So what it boils down to is changes. The state also added something they call post-secondary assets. Now, if you remember, I've made some presentations where we've talked about the movement at Garden City High School to kind of get post-secondary market value kind of assets, something kids can take with them that's tangible to set them up for success. Well, now those are going to be graduation requirements. And so we've still got some clarification from the state that we need to get about what exactly is going to count for some of these things, but they're above and beyond credits. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Addition of financial literacy, addition of STEM, but additional recommendations. The State Board of Education is also recommending that all kids, not requiring, but recommending they complete the FAFSA for college financial aid. And so that's going to be a big push. Currently at Garden City High School, we're in the 40s as far as the percent of kids that complete the FAFSA before they leave. We're somewhere in around 40 or the low 40% range. And that is, as far as 6A schools in the state, puts us right about average for Garden City.
Question about that.
Yep.
Is there any potential for them to require a certain percentage to affect funding?
There hasn't been anything in there as of yet. Nothing but essentially a recommendation that everyone do the FAFSA, but not a requirement that everyone does the FAFSA. They also recommended for districts to find alternative avenues for credit, a lot more work-based learning, a lot of opportunities to get with community organizations and do some real experimental kind of learning. And then examine ways for competency-based granting credit, testing out those kind of options. So those were just recommendations, not requirements right now. At Garden City High School, that means we're going to add, of course, the STEM requirements. We're going to add financial literacy. We're going to keep our computer requirement, keep our speech requirement, keep our health requirements. But that does reduce in a 24 credit system the number of possible electives for kids from 8 to 6.5. And then at Achieve and Virtual, the same kind of things. They're going to add the STEM requirement. They're going to add financial literacy, but that addition also lowers their elective requirements. So they will have a little bit of an impact. Beyond just the requirements, those post-secondary assets that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, so like Steve was saying, these are outside of your credits, your classes. And they can come from, students will be able to complete 2 or more post-secondary assets. They come from 2 categories. It can either be a career, real world example. Some of those are like youth apprenticeships, the seal of biliteracy, industry recognized certifications. And I know all 3 buildings are working towards more and more, the more certifications we can give kids going into the real world, the better off. 4-H Kansas Key Award, that should say Eagle Scout there, 2 or more high school athletic activities.
probably for the high school, that's going to be something that's attainable for a good chunk of Mr. Norby's kids. Us at Achieve and the virtual, we're going to have to work a little bit different to try to get that. And then the academic exam. So again, it can come from the career IPS or academic. And so the ACT composite score of 21, 9 or plus college hours, SAT score, completing boards of regents curriculum, advanced placement exams. So these are just examples that the state has provided. I really feel like the list is going to increase, but this is what they kind of the guidance they gave us. Like at Achieve, I know, and virtual, I think the just going out and working and doing
The career.
Oh, yeah.
The career thing.
Yeah, the career things and then workplace learning, those type of things. So with both of those, it's the biggest thing that we've talked about is just how are we going to track these? Like it's going to be an undertaking to track these for every kid that's walking through all of our hallways. So I know Kathleen's kind of worked on even on their credit to try to track these, but that's going to be the big part of the post-secondary assets that they have. Yep. And so Steve had also talked about the financial literacy piece. It's just like for instance, you have to have 0.5 health credit or 0.5 physical education. Now a 0.5 financial literacy course is going to be required. We talked about going full in person at our two buildings, and the amount of staffing was going to be an issue. And so there is a class in the virtual academy that has a lot of the things that we want with financial literacy. So it's going to be a hybrid. Students will have the option of taking an in-person class or an online class through the Ingenuity at GCH and Achieve. The virtual option will be through Ingenuity. What that curriculum looks like right now, we're still kind of in the process of going through that. And you guys will hear more about that as we get further in this process.
For the financial literacy class that we already offer in person at the high school, we have some seniors taking that as their math elective. We use the Dave Ramsey curriculum. We've been using that for several years now. So we would propose continuing that for the in-person, but then.
And then the Ingenuity has already been curriculum approved as well. The financial, well, it's called personal finance, but the curriculum is aligned. It's just a matter of calling it financial literacy. It's semantics. So, and Steve and Lucas have already really touched on this, the new STEM requirement, a full credit. So it can, hopefully we're going to get a whole lot more CTE classes through Ingenuity that will help us, especially the virtual and the alternative, be able to provide those career and tech ed classes that can also count as STEM classes. It's probably going to be hardest for virtual than it will be for them. But hopefully with those CTE classes that are coming down the line, not just for STEM, we're going to be able to offer so much more for my virtual students as far as electives. So we're excited about that.
In the next year before these kids that are currently 8th graders hit the high school and start in this system, we're really going to need some help from the state helping us or giving us some direction on how to define, as I said, what does advanced CTE mean? What does advanced technology mean? Or is the state just going to say, hey, local control, you guys figure it out. Go through your curriculum guide and you figure it out. So, I mean, I could see it happening both ways because that's a really big thing and a big ask potentially from a lot of districts. I feel good about the number of kids we probably have going through, especially with the programs that Lucas is adding in his building with the auto and the manicuring, that we can get a lot of kids into some of those career and tech and programs, but just we need probably some more help defining what some of those things really are.
You guys have any questions?
I think there'll probably be some challenges when you guys have spoke of tonight of the implementation of this, but do you feel that the direction the state school board's kind of going this way is good for the students? Is it positive in your opinions or?
yeah, I think it prepares them for life after high school. So it's giving them some other avenues and the financial literacy, I think is good for everybody to be a part of that class.
And I think it's an area that they're not strong enough in right now. So I think it's absolutely necessary.
And I think it fits right in with Commissioner Watson and kind of, he's been talking about Kansas Can and that whole philosophy of getting our kids when they leave the high school ready to hit the ground running, ready to go. You know, if they want to have a post-secondary degree, they're ready to go get one. If they want to get into the workforce, they've got the tools to be able to do it. So I think it is I think it is a good move. I think it'll be good for kids. But I think it'll be the adults that are gonna have the most difficult time trying to figure out how to deliver it. As I said, you know, just trying to do the math on some of these sections that we need and you know, I'm not sure how a school without the resources, I'm lucky to get to lead Garden City High School. I'm not sure how some schools without the resources are gonna be able to do that and add all those extra sections of financial literacy, make sure we can report on the reporting and the data keeping maybe on post-secondary assets. That may be the tough part. How do you track who went out for 2 extracurricular activities or
Post-secondary.
yeah, that post-secondary thing is gonna be, it could be kind of a record keeping nightmare. But I think it'll be good for the kids. It'll be the adults that have the adjustment.
So that record keeping piece is all gonna be in place by the end of next year? So that it's ready when they're freshmen?
That's the plan, yeah. Now, that's one thing that may come down to, well, local control. You guys keep records of it and then, you know, if we ever want to see it, we'll ask it for it. And there are some places we potentially could do that. All the kids have Zello. They all have a plan of study. They could record what they've done in internships or what they've done as far as their ACT scores or what they've done for activities. They could be recording that in their plan of study through Zello, and that could help us keep the records.
And it'll help them as well if they include this in their IPS. It helps them track their own stuff.
Any other questions? Look like you're on the right track anyway.
There's probably gonna be the
Next step.
opportunity to come back early in August and kind of give a little bit more, this is what we want to do as the changes, and then by the second meeting in August, have an opportunity for you guys to approve the changes. That way, we can start working on getting the needed changes through curriculum council and then into the curriculum offering handbooks at the high schools, because counselors will start pre-enrolling 8th graders in February. And so the timeline of needing to have some of these things done, these changes of, yes, you guys do approve that we'll have, you know, personal or financial literacy as a half credit, health as a half credit, and those changes. Probably by the second meeting in August, we'll need to have that kind of as a voted on approval so that we start putting those things through proper channels so that we can get those 8th graders in February enrolled accurately.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Spring data update.
Okay, so we're gonna start with some longitudinal data. Maybe. Just go that way. All right. We talked about this longitudinal data in February. And so we have the same data, except for now we have our spring Fastbridge data that's been added. And we took out, you can only do 5 at a time. So we took out the fall of last year and we have the spring added on. Okay. And so you'll notice as we scroll through the grades, that there were times when the data didn't look quite as good as we wanted it to longitudinally, but we had a lot of bright spots at grade levels and buildings. And so at the kindergarten, it says that there was really not an increase from the winter of 2021 till this spring. But we had 4 buildings who had huge increases. Alta Brown increased by 22%. Edith Sherman by 25%. Georgia Matthews by 34% and Jenny Wilson by 36%. So those 4 buildings in kindergarten grade level showed great improvement. Keep in mind, this data is the district overall. Okay, first grade.
Can I ask you a quick
Yes.
question? I beg your pardon. But that sort of suggests that we had huge opposite results in some buildings.
It could, but some of the buildings just stayed, because we averaged out at 0, right? So yeah, there were some buildings that did not have those huge increases like that. But I don't think there were any that dropped 36%. There's enough buildings that we have these big increases, but as long as the decreases are not real huge, they're gonna average out to 0. First grade, we did have 2 buildings that showed really good improvement. That was Jenny Wilson, increased 11, and Plymouth increased 18%. And then you'll notice that we were up 2% from last winter in first grade. This is our early reading Spanish, which is only 1 section of students. So 1 or 2 students can make a huge difference in this data because it's only about 15 kids. But if you just look at this year, at the growth, these 3 bars are just this year. The growth for the kindergarten students was really good. And then they dropped a little bit here, but the 2 spring ones are pretty similar, 70 and 69 for first grade. And remember the test changes in first grade. Second grade, we did see some improvement of about 5% from the winter, so 43 to 48. I like to look at springs too. So 42 to 48, spring to spring. And then third grade was about 1% spring to spring. And fourth grade, it dropped, it dropped a little bit. And I'll talk about why maybe after we look at all of them. Fifth grade, spring to spring was up 5. But we were a little worried about this drop that we had this year. And then 6th grade was up, is that a 9 or a 3? It's like a 9 maybe. 49. So it was down 2, spring to spring. So if you notice, as they're getting a little bit older, they're dropping a little bit more. 7th grade, there was a big drop, spring to spring. 8th grade was up, spring to spring. Okay, and then 9th or high school, is that next?
9th and 10th.
Oh, 9th and 10th. Okay, so 9th they increased 1%, and then 10th they decreased 2%. Okay, so why is that happening? Why are we decreasing as they're getting older? Has to do probably with, and we don't know for sure, but we think because if we don't have the skills from K through 3, the early literacy skills, then that's going to have a more profound effect as they get older. And that was our focus this year, was early literacy, and we had huge gains in those early grades.
Okay. So I want to preface this just a little bit. On the left-hand side of your screen, those are phonemic awareness skills. This is a breakdown of the sub-skills within those tests. This year, 8 out of 11 buildings focused their WIGs on phonemic awareness skills. So this is where a lot of their effort and focus was. The right-hand side is our phonics skills. And we had a little bit less focus on that because we didn't have a strong curriculum to support it. In kindergarten, our word segmenting improved from fall to spring by 13% in the kindergarten. Phonics improved 9% from the fall to the spring. In first grade, in those phonemic awareness skills, we improved then 13%. So we're now up to 70% of kids who have those basic phonemic awareness skills. If you remember in the winter when we reported, we talked about 7% of our kids fell below benchmark on their phonics skills. We've rebounded about 6% of those kids, and we're now just 1% from where we started the year with our phonics. Again, we want that donut to be green, so we're definitely not where we want to be, but we're getting closer to being on the positive side. For second grade, we saw a 33% improvement in those phonemic awareness skills from the beginning of the year to now. And then in the phonics side, we showed a 2% improvement. And then for third grade, we showed another 11% of improvement. We're now at almost 90% of kids who have those phonemic awareness skills, which is exactly where we want to be. We're striving to get to that 90% and above. For phonics, we're still way below where we want to be, but we did show a 3% improvement again in the third grade. Some bright spots in this. Jenny Wilson was kind of an early adopter on our UFly program. So when we talk about kindergarten and first grade, that they showed a 36% increase and an 11% increase in those longitudinal data. It's partly because they were early adopting those programs that we're wanting to put in place across the district next year. 8 out of our 11 buildings really focused on Haggerty and those phonemic awareness skills, and you can see that we had huge impact in that. Next year, we're wanting to implement UFly across the district, and we're really hoping we're going to see similar data next year on that phonics side. Because if we can get kids to 90% by the end of third grade with phonics and phonemic awareness, they have a strong foundation for then those state assessment type skills and those standards-based skills that they're going to encounter in the upper grades. Do you have any questions about that? Okay.
Okay, so we talked about group growth in February, and just keep in mind is that it's a different way to look at our progress towards our WIGs. And what we wanted to look at with group growth was the students that were making typical or aggressive growth and or above benchmark. And we put those together into one group to see how we were doing. Now, the results were not as good as they were in February. We did have one grade that improved about 3%. That was second grade. The rest of them dropped about 4 to 5%. And some of the older grades dropped a little bit more than that. And that's the same reason that they dropped in the longitudinal data was we don't have those early skills. And so it has a bigger effect as they get older. If you want to go ahead and scroll through, I'll just highlight a couple things real quick. There were some buildings that did have good growth. And so in the winter, kindergarten was at 71, and in the spring we're at 67. We really want this up around 85 to 90% for each grade eventually. That's our goal, is that we have that many kids growing or are above benchmark. But in kindergarten, there were 3 buildings again that did show like 90% growth. That was Abe Huber, Alpha Brown, and Buffalo Jones. In first grade, we went down about 4%. It was about 3 to 4% at each grade level. Go ahead. Second grade was the one that did go up. In February, we were at 84, and in the spring, we were at 86. So that one's getting really close to where we want to be. Third grade went down about 4%, but we did have Edith Sharman did really well at the 4th grade level with their growth. 5th grade went down about 4 to 5%. So, oh no, wait. 4th was 45. Then 5th grade is when we started seeing the bigger drops. So in February, we were at 71.2, and here we're at 62.8. And then 6th grade, in February, we were at 76. So 6th grade didn't drop quite as bad. 7th grade dropped about 10%. We went from 74 to 64. And then 8th grade from 60 or 75 to 68, so about 7%, and then the high school dropped about 5%. Okay, so any questions about group growth?
Do you feel like, I mean, you presented the numbers, but are there things that you're focused on to improve those more, or what are your biggest challenges at this point?
You want to do it? Go ahead.
I think the screening to intervention report really tells us a lot, that where we were focused with our phonemic awareness, we saw huge growth and got kids where we wanted them to be. Over the next year, Garfield is also adopting Haggerty, which is our phonemic awareness program. They're going to start implementing that with 3 and 4-year-olds. So I'm hoping that in the next year to 2 years, we're going to see that 90% mark that we saw at 3rd grade in 2nd grade. And if that happens, then we are right where we need to be. The phonics, you know, we've got a couple buildings that implemented U-Fly early, and we saw, you know, huge gains in their phonics skills in those buildings. And they even didn't start it until I think 2nd semester, right? There wasn't anybody that started 1st semester. So in a semester, we saw some really strong gains in those buildings that started that early. So, you know, as we roll that out at the beginning of next year, you know, we have high hopes that we're going to see some real impact with kids. And everything that the science of reading is telling us is that if we can get that foundation in place, it then gives those upper grades something to build on. I think some of our secondary data is impacted by the fact that kids can't read words. So they can pick out point of view, but if they can't read the story, they don't have enough comprehension to identify those things. So, you know, we just don't have that foundation in place for them to really show the kind of gains that we want them to. So, you know, one of the things that we did this year to really give teachers the skills they need was letters training. And we saw a huge impact in those early reading scores. In difference between a letters trained teacher versus a non-letters trained teacher was 20%. So, I mean, it tells us that had huge impact. Some of our buildings who had, you know, one teacher that was taking letters training and another who was not, and they were also adopting U-Fly and Haggerty, all these programs that we really believe in. That letters trained teacher still had significant differences in her scores versus her partner teacher who did not have letters training. So it tells us that training is helping teachers to be more responsive. You know, even with the same tools in their hand, that training is giving them something more that they can really impact kids. So we are strong believers that in the K-3 grades, it's really important for our teachers to have that training.
And I think it will show up in the data in the later grades as those kids that have that structured literacy move on. The kids that we have right now that are 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th graders, they were not part of phonics instruction when they were K-3. And so the shift in how to teach reading will take a few years to show up with the upper grades.
What things are you planning for the current 5th through 8th graders?
We're really concentrating on strong tier 1 instruction and supporting our teachers with a strong structure and helping them learn how to scaffold and give just-in-time support for those students that need it.
But there's going to have to be some good tier 2 instruction to remediate, you know, some of that they weren't given, you know, and that's a failure on the system's part. I mean, nationwide, we were not focused on phonics and phonemic awareness for years, and it has had an impact on a whole generation of readers. So the science of reading is now telling us where we need to be. And, you know, we're really trying to make sure that we get that in place for those early grades. But we don't necessarily want to hold, you know, 50% of our kids are meeting benchmark in the upper grades, 40 to 50%. We don't want to go back to phonics skills at that age. It's going to have to be in those tier 2 intervention times.
We've got resources for that.
Different buildings have different programs. So you know, the year that I worked at Kenneth Henderson, they have an interventionist, a reading interventionist that uses a variety of programs with kids in pullout. But quite honestly, I don't know that we have enough interventionists for the number of kids that are not meeting benchmark.
Then we shift some of those to classroom teachers.
That's at the elementary level. But, in all honesty, we pulled out the data in FastBridge there as well. Our fully certified teachers showed a 5% improvement in kids, moving kids above benchmark. Our teachers who were not fully certified, we moved 11% of kids below benchmark. So that certification and being fully trained is impactful. And we need them in front of classrooms with kids because honestly, you get to the secondary schools, we can't remediate 60% of kids. We can't do interventions for 60% of kids. We have got to get strong foundation in tier 1 for all kids in those early grades so that we don't need that many, so that many kids don't need interventions. And I think that move, I wasn't part of the leadership team, but I'm guessing that move was made in order to get kids to the point they don't need that many interventions.
Well, of course, the obvious thing, sort of put in agricultural terms, you can't necessarily pull the herd, improve your data. In other words, what you want to do is every child deserves an education.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's back, do we have the resources we need for the intervention that's needed for those upper grades? And if not, how do we get it?
The unique answer to that is it's kind of like when you go into the doctor and they got to start doing all these different kind of diagnostics to figure out exactly what it is that you need. So there isn't just one tool. We have to have a variety because some students may have some phonics lacking, being able to put blends together, where some students just need some fluency practice. So you have to have multiple different tools to provide, because especially as they get older, the breadth and the scope of the deficiencies they have are much more. In kindergarten and first grade, it's just going to be, do they know letter sounds or not? And do we need to practice letter sounds or not? And as we get into middle school, there may be some students, especially second language learners, that are still trying to learn initial sounds and initial blends. And some students are needing ending sounds and ending blends. So those are two different resources that you're needing for two different sets of interventions. So it's more complicated. Yeah. So you're going to have a wide variety of tools. Just putting kids on a computer and hoping that computer figure it does not work. So we got to be able to provide them with the proper resources. We also have to provide them with the exact resources needed for the skill deficiency. So diagnostic testing would be a huge component.
So yeah, it's unfair to ask you that question because it's sort of another area. But from a Board of Education standpoint, it's part of the area.
Right, and I think my hesitation is because we have a very vast list of recommended resources or approved resources for the district. It's lengthy and buildings choose from that. So I can't off the top of my head tell you what each secondary school is using, but there is an extensive list that they can choose from. And everybody's using different things. We've had discussions in our department about should we limit those resources? Should we go back? Because some of those were adopted so many years ago. The current science of reading research probably doesn't support it, but it is on our list of resources because when it was adopted, it was, approved. So, but that's my hesitation is that it's like, I can't speak to what each building's using. And it's possible they're using things that are not well-grounded in research, the newest research.
I certainly appreciate it. Thank you for that sort of the off-the-cuff remarks to a different question. Just need to keep working at it, I think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. On to new business, discipline policy committee.
So last year around this time, we talked about updating our discipline policy. It hadn't been updated since I think 1998 was the last time we had a major update to our discipline plan. And so our recommendations that we had last year was to look at pre-K and updating that and using pre-K two as kind of our trial run for this school year. And so we did that, and then through that process, we've been working on 3 through 6 or 3 through 12, excuse me, and what that will look like, and kind of our proposals or recommendations for the board for that. And so we're going to kind of go through kind of our recommendations that we have for 3 through 12, and then also in doing our recommendations for 3 through 12, some things that we need to do with pre-K through 2 to kind of make sure everything's all aligned. Ms. Dubois is one of our students that's going through, she's in the K-State Leadership Academy. And so this is going to be kind of one of her practicum projects. So she's going to actually do the presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to her and let her kind of handle everything. And then Suzette and I'll be here for moral support for her. So you're up, Ms. Ryan.
Oh, great. Okay, so with the moving parts, everything works cohesively. So we really wanted it to be easy to follow, flows through each level. And then as you can see, these are our committee members. I'm right there, just kidding. Okay, so for the current policy, there was 4 levels of discipline. We were more focused on supporting kids for the suspension level. The changes are building to support student needs, and one size fits all for pre-K through 12. So more focused on punitive punishment rather than teaching appropriate behaviors. The Kansas Star recognition through KSDE. Our current policy hinders application. There's no out of school suspension for pre-K through or pre-kinder through kinder students, and it requires mandatory expulsion hearing for certain situations rather than using it as a teaching opportunity. So the recommendations that we're wanting this year are for the implementation for new policy for the 3 through 12 during the following school year. Is we've already got the pre-K through 2 policy, correct? And then the 3 through 6 policy and the 7 through 12, and determine any revisions or changes needed for this upcoming school year. So what we did was we updated the verbiage. We made it very consistent throughout, so there was no discrepancies. We also we moved stealing, vandalism, and extortion from a level 3 to a level 4, and take in-school suspension out of level 5. And we create resource guide for administrators, which includes examples of interventions and strategies during the next school year. And we really wanted parent, family, and community support. That was a main focus.
And I might add on that. So some of the updates that we talked about, like as far as having in-school suspension, taking that out of level 5. Level 5, when we get to level 5, those are the heavy hitters. Those are mandatory expulsion hearing offenses. That's going to be bringing a weapon to school, distribution of drugs on school grounds. I mean, those are the heavy hitters that are going to be, there's going to be criminal charges that are probably going to be filed with those sort of things. And so our board policy currently says that those things require an expulsion hearing. And so it doesn't make sense for them to have in-school suspension as an option when that's not really an option based on our board policy. And that was just an oversight that we missed on the pre-K too. And so we caught that as we kind of move through.
Well, and another thing to kind of go off of that, at level 4, we're trying to be more restorative with our recommendations, utilizing family community supports. And then level 5, as he stated, there was no need for further assistance because we were already at a very heavy level that at that point, it was kind of out of our control.
That's one of those go directly to jail, do not pass go kind of offenses. So. And then the resource guide, we really felt like that's something that we didn't want to just rush through and put that together to have it put together. So we're going to bring the committee back together next year and kind of work on that and talk about what that can look like and how to put that together to make that a tool for the principals to use moving forward. And so that'll be something that we'll work on creating next year with the committee.
So the move from 4 levels to 5 levels of discipline. our focus is on behavior modification rather than punitive consequences. We included support for families, allows administration more flexibility with consequences while still following board policy. Consequences build on supporting student needs. So really just consistency across the board, and making sure that our wordage was consistent throughout.
Can I ask a quick question there? The last one, consequences building and support student needs. Social emotional needs is part of that. And so historically, we've tried to integrate Compass and yet there's elements of privacy, and I think I've asked this before under a different conversation. You know, coordination and communication, collaboration is so important there, and sometimes there are things that maybe can't be shared between those services and our staff. But yet some of what we run into, and occasionally you might have a student that is headed towards a level 5, you know, they may be at 3 or whatever, unless we can address those social emotional issues.
Right.
So focusing on behavior modification surely incorporates some of that evaluation.
Sure.
Home life or some kind of diagnosis, or I don't know, but somewhere that's got to come in.
And so, and you'll see here in just a minute, Mark, we kind of go into that in a little bit. There's a whole resource section on there, like community supports that we can do. So looking at doing a referral for Compass or Genesis or what other mental health agency that they want to go to in the community, working with DCF, looking at some of the programs that the Juvenile Detention Center offers that on like tobacco, drugs, having the kids go take some of those trainings and go through some of those. So those will be some of the recommendations that we would have in there that are kind of tied to it.
And they're kind of throughout all the levels, so we're not just waiting till level 4 before we start some of those, starting at the beginning.
Yeah.
To get those in place.
Thank you.
So with level.
And this is really hard to see and I apologize.
We just basically added in, further interventions, parent, guardian, caregiver contact. We wanted to make sure that that was consistent throughout, because it's not always going to be the parent that is our contact. It could be a caregiver or a guardian. And so we just wanted to make sure that that was very specific. And then we added family community supports to each. And I think the other one, we just did the conference with student, office intervention is necessary to correct dress code violation. I don't really know what I think we just added those things. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I remember. And then with this one, we just added some school interventions.
You might say what level 2, read the description.
Level 2 is productive classroom environment, behaviors that occur in the classroom and interfere with the learning of others. We did add on this use of offensive, profane language. That was not included. And then possession and or use of distinguishable toy weapon, selling products, materials, or personal gain. I believe those are the ones that we added. And then again, as you can see, moving down, school interventions, parent, guardian, caregiver contact, it stays the same consistently through 3 through 12, actually. We did provide special materials, limit materials, plan for student choice assessment tasks, utilize paraprofessionals, provide quiet place for student to retreat, and conflict resolution. We added that. For family community supports, again, we did a problem solve, anchor chart, individual support plan, referral to community counseling.
And some of the verbiage that we changed from the pre-K 2 was that piece where we were specifically naming Compass, and that is we kind of took out the specifics so they could go to any place that offered therapy and things like that. That was the kind of verbiage that we kind of took out the specifics. So it gave the parents a little more options of where to go.
And I think the thing that's nice about this is at every level, so this would be like an example of level 2 for 3 through 6. So we kind of broke that up too, because in the past it's been a pre-K 12, it's a one size fits all. And we really tried to to mix that up based on things that were gonna be more age appropriate. So now we've got pre-K 2, we've got 3 through 6, and then 7 through 12 discipline plans. Now, the offenses that they could get in trouble for at each level are gonna be the same offenses, but how we respond and the supports that we would put in the community supports and things like that are gonna look different, because going to the JDC for the tobacco program or something like that, not gonna be appropriate for a pre-K 2 student. So we wouldn't have those sort of things in there. And so we really tried to make those age appropriate and benefit. And so when you look at that, the top of it kind of gives you an idea of what the behaviors are and some examples of what those behaviors would be. And then we have the first incident, and so from that first incident, there's a list of things that the principal can do based on the needs of that child and what they think is going to be most effective. So it gives them a little bit of flexibility. And then further interventions and community supports. And then if we continue to have subsequent interventions, the bottom part is what that discipline would look like, some ideas of things that they can do to address that kind of moving forward. So it's a little bit more detailed, I think.
I would say it's more detailed, but we also, we kept the wordage consistent. And then we also added things and changed things, so it would be more of an overall and discretion of the principal as well, where they wanted to direct them for community support or parent involvement or parent support. So with the level 3 orderly environment, behaviors that occur that are not intended to cause physical or mental harm to another individual, but do negatively affect an orderly environment. We just added some things, police conference with parent approval. We added consider restitution practices, referral to anti-vaping tobacco classes. And then again, we added some more family community support and then some school interventions. Some of those include police conference with parent notification, develop a safety plan, contact Department of Children and Families, things like that. With the level 4, safe environment behaviors that are intended to cause another individual physical or mental harm and or are illegal. So again, this is where the heavy hitting situations start to take place. And one of the things that we changed on here was substances, including but not limited to all tobacco vaping products. Unfortunately, we have to add vaping now. So we definitely looked at that and took that into effect. Is there anything else that we talk about on this one?
Before, vaping was tucked under tobacco.
Correct.
Now it's explicit.
Yes. And we wanted to make sure of that. The other thing that we added on this one, bullying, physical, verbal, or cyber bullying, and then threatening another learner or threatening of school personnel. Is that right?
Yeah, and then
There was
this
one more.
is the one where we moved extortion to extortion. We had that in the pre-K 2 one. We had it at a level. It was actually in the level 3 behavior. And Mr. Norby, when we went over it, we went over this with SAC and kind of talked about the principles. And Mr. Norby said, you know, if we got a situation where extortion, things like that are happening, we're probably going to have law enforcement involved in that, and so it probably needs to be a little bit higher than a level 3. And so we moved those things to level 4 at all the levels. So that was one of the pieces that we moved. Didn't notice it, and honestly, I don't think you probably have too many kindergartners that are going to be getting in trouble for extortion. But when it gets to the upper levels, that could very well happen. And so we just need to make sure that that's consistent. So I think that's probably why we missed that. Then level 5.
Level 5 is like the final straw, like he said, cops are coming, you're in trouble. And we no longer can really, it's out of our hands because it's following board policy. So this is very specific and very condensed because we don't need all of the supports because at this point, it's no longer in our control, but we did just say referral to drug alcohol program, referral to parent support program, referral to community counseling, and provide community resource folder. We do have further interventions, some school interventions. With the school interventions, contact appropriate agencies, law enforcement, and it's very specific and very detailed of what needs to happen.
Right. So these are situations where they're gonna be going, they're gonna get a mandatory 10-day suspension and look at it going to an expulsion, for these behaviors. So it's gonna be possession of drugs with the intent to sell or distribute, possession and or use of a weapon or firearm at school, causing serious physical injury, possession of explosives, ammunition with the intent to use or sell, and arson are kind of the big heavy hitters. And so obviously if those things are happening, we need to address that, so. And then we kind of did the same thing at the secondary level. I don't know that we need to go through the whole thing with you all again, but really the only significant changes that I would say what you would see there would be just kind of what the community supports look like, because it's going to look different based on their age. Like I said, the JDC, one of the things that we talked about was doing a referral to the multidisciplinary team. You have to be at least 10, I believe it is, before they can even go to that. So that's only going to be offered for certain age groups and different age bands. So that's kind of what we put together. So questions that we can answer?
You'd be able to send it to us in a different.
Yeah, I apologize. I thought it was going to be easier to see, John, but yeah, we'll send, so you can see it like this. I'll send, is that all right? One of us, yeah, we'll get it to Leanne and get it out to you. Leanne and Jennifer, I apologize for that. Other questions? Okay, so I don't think we need action tonight, obviously, but
I'm assuming. that-
hopefully the consent agenda in June, and then, yeah. Because I know there's a lot of principals that are harassing me because if this gets changed, then it's gonna go into their handbooks, and so, and those updated, but I will get copies. I'll get that sent out first thing in the morning for everybody. Okay?
So if we have questions, we can call Violet back.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm very knowledgeable with all my notes.
You did good, Violet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, girls wrestling proposal. Just like to come to our meeting.
I love them. Wouldn't miss a chance to talk to you guys. Pass it down. Not like Josh, I'll actually bring you a handout with the information. So, thank you guys for letting me come back. This is about girls wrestling in 2020, and it was actually, the fall of 2019, the 2019-2020 school year. We added girls wrestling as a sport. Keisha added girls wrestling as a sport, and we added girls wrestling at Garden City High School. If you know anything about the spring of 2020, we had a few things go on. So essentially what we did when we added girls wrestling, nobody across the state, we were one of the first states in the entire country to add girls wrestling. Nobody knew exactly what girls wrestling was going to be. Nobody knew how fast it would grow, how the tournaments would look, how the teams would look. We added it and we figured out things along the way. We thought it would be like bowling. We thought it would be like cross country. We thought it'd be like track, where you would have one coach, like we do with bowling, Kip Nichols, and we go to a bowling tournament and we have a girls division of the bowling tournament. We have a boys division of the bowling tournament. Cross country is the same way. Track is the same way. That's what we assumed was going to happen. So we went that direction to start with, knowing that in the future, if things changed, we could change. What we didn't realize, and I'll be honest, I wasn't sure whether girls wrestling, when we added it, would be here to stay. We didn't really have any idea. We went from we've had girls on our wrestling team forever. But we've had 2, 3 at the most on our wrestling teams. Well, once we added girls wrestling, we went from 2 or 3 on the team, but now we had 15 in the first year, 20 in the second year. This past year, we had 38 on the girls wrestling team. Cool thing about girls wrestling, these are girls that wouldn't have been doing anything else in the winter. This is a brand new sport for them. It's not like we took a whole bunch of girls that were on the basketball team and they became girls wrestlers. That's just not the same clientele of kids. So it grew really fast. We didn't know that it was going to grow that fast.
And what ended up becoming very difficult, and we're dealing with it with the Rocky Walton tournament, is because it grew so fast, there's all these girls that are competing. How do we fit it into things like the Rocky Walton tournament? How do we fit it into the Tournament of Champions in Newton? How do we fit it into the Kansas City Stampede or the Flatwater Fracas? How does girls wrestling fit in? And what we figured out is it doesn't fit in real well, because the amount of facilities people need to host a large girls tournament and a large boys tournament at the same time, the facilities, we can't even do it. That's why our girls tournament of the Rocky Walton is 1 day and our boys tournament is 2 days. We've got to figure out something better for that. And so what people have started to do is they've just broken off tournaments. The Tournament of Champions in Newton, you have a girls tournament that is 2 days and a separate boys tournament that is a separate 2 days. There's some tournaments that only offer boys. There's some tournaments that only offer girls. What that has done to us is it's put our coaches in a really bad position, because we still have a similar amount of coaches as we did in 2019, but now, and if you guys know about wrestling, we have our JV kids, we have our varsity kids, we have our JV girls, we have our varsity girls. Now we have our wrestling coaches, and they are going 1,000 different directions. So what people have started to do, everybody started pretty much the same. It was their boys wrestling coaches became their wrestling coaches, but what people have done is they've gone back and added, and what most of them have added is a head girls wrestling coach and an assistant head girls wrestling coach. And then you have the head boys wrestling coach, the assistant boys wrestling coach, and all the other coaches are essentially assistants for both programs. Other places it's problematic, regionals, Acacia Girls Regionals, you have girls wrestling regionals the week before boys wrestling. So all our coaches load up with the girls, head to regional wrestling. There's nobody left back for boys practice. Same with state. State on state week is Wednesday, Thursday, and then boys is Friday, Saturday. So the two most important practices before state for boys and our coaches are at girls wrestling, because even state can't hold boys and girls all at the same time. So what I'm asking you, and obviously this is becoming a Title IX issue, because our girls, right, wrong, or indifferent, either our girls or our boys, somebody is kind of getting left behind in this whole deal. And so it's something that it's finally time for us to address it. You guys a couple of years ago actually addressed it with the middle schools. At the middle school level, we have girls wrestling with their coaches and their budget and their travel, and boys wrestling, two completely different groups of people at both middle schools. So we addressed it a couple of years ago at the middle school level. Now it's time for me to come back and essentially ask that we address it at the high school level. You can see the finances on the other page. What we're asking for is a budget for girls wrestling and a head girls wrestling coach and an assistant head girls wrestling coach. And that's all we're asking. The last few years, when we added this, I said, if we add this, I'll find the money for the budget. So the last few years, we've went out and fundraised money and covered the budget for the girls wrestling teams, whether it's uniforms or travel costs or whatever the girls might need. We've covered that. Now I think it's time that we do what we did with the middle school and officially add girls wrestling with the coach, the coaching staff, and the budget that they need. I'm not asking that you guys do this tonight. I'm asking that you guys consider it at the next. So pretty simple and straightforward. You think Acacia will keep the seasons at the same time of year? I'm driving to Topeka on Thursday. I'm on the wrestling advisory committee. We're going to keep them at the same time, but we're trying to find a way, because Acacia understands what we're doing with girls wrestling isn't ideal. It's not fair on those girls to wrestle regionals. And if you guys know stuff about wrestling, you have to watch your weight. It's not fair for those girls to wrestle regionals, make weight at regionals, and then you're off almost a week and a half until you wrestle again. So Acacia, on Thursday, we're going to have the conversation about how do we make state wrestling and regional wrestling and girls wrestling in general more equitable like it is for boys wrestling. Mark, thoughts?
I would just say, I thought we had addressed some element of this a couple years ago and you clarified it was the middle school.
Yeah. So the middle school a couple of years ago, they were essentially having the same problems. We've got great wrestling coaches and our wrestling coaches go above and beyond and they'll just do anything that you ask them to do. But it is becoming a little, if you talk to our wrestling coaches, that winter season is the longest season that we have. And it is now with girls, boys, and the sub-varsities, our coaches are literally gone from the beginning of December all the way until the end of February and to early March. And you guys approved our out-of-state travel. You guys know we're really good at wrestling. For example, girls wrestling finished second in the state this year. I don't think a lot of people really understand how impressive that is because girls wrestling right now, we have 5 and 6A combined. So that's 70 schools, the 70 biggest schools in the state of Kansas. And they all have girls wrestling. And those are the people that can put girls on a wrestling team. You get to the lower divisions, 1, 2, 3, and 4A, and some of those teams may have 2 or 3 girls on a wrestling team. 5 and 6A, almost everybody has a full girls wrestling team. So to get second in state in 6A, and with that number of schools, that's almost 82% of the entire student enrollment in Kansas is in that 70 school population. So to win a state runner-up in girls wrestling this year, and we were third the prior year, our coaches want to do what's best for these girls. And you guys obviously saw the travel schedule going to Oklahoma and going to Kansas City and going to Nebraska and going out to Colorado in order for our girls to be as competitive as what our boys have been for the last 45 years. That's what we're going to have to do. But they can't do it the way we're currently doing it.
So at this point, the budget expenditures for travel, for example, for all of that is unchanged. It's just we've got to have coaches.
We've got to have coaches and they need their own budget. Currently, they share a budget with the boys. So when they go to order new singlets or get some new scales, and it's not a very big budget. You guys see the budget there. It's not a very big budget, but singlets and that stuff wears out quick and it's expensive. So everything would match the boys, or it would be like boys and girls basketball. Our boys basketball team and our girls basketball team, they get the exact same thing. Their budgets are the same. Their booster, something even small. When you have a sport that's a boys and girls sport like basketball, the booster club is the same booster club. When it's a different sport, so like baseball, softball, in the state of Kansas, they can have separate booster clubs because they're completely different sports. But in order to stay Title IX compliant, we'll have the same wrestling booster club for both, just like we do for basketball.
Thank you.
Thanks for hearing me.
Assuming that'll also be on the consent agenda unless you have questions or.
Where is the budget? Where does it come from?
So it would be an additional commitment from our general fund that's transferred over to student funds. That number has remained the same to the high school for the last several years. So it'd be an increase to that general fund allocation.
What was that? 1993, our athletic budget was at the high school was $193,000. In 2023, our athletic budget at the high school was $149,000. But I don't want,
that sounds like an athletic director, yeah.
Helmets are not the same price as they were in 1993. I'll just say that. So, thanks, Colleen.
Thanks, sir.
See you guys.
That's an impressive stat. I'd say.
He quotes it a lot.
Yeah, I'm surprised that's the first time I've heard it, maybe. Your turn.
Is it my turn? Okay, I just walked up here because I thought I was next, so.
You're already up there, so I didn't.
All right, so here to talk to the board about where we're at on our friend property. About 6 weeks ago, the plant facilities director and I went through the building to just kind of see what was there, the shape of the building. Found out since then that it was closed back in 1991. The district has made multiple attempts to sell it in the past. Currently, the building does not have any working water, septic. It hasn't been maintained over the years. There are a lot of issues that would need to be addressed in the building to make it into a workable facility. Due to our current population of students, not really much of a possibility of opening it again. It's kind of being used as some overflow storage, which we're working with plant facilities to get some of that stuff cleared out that can be salvageable, and then pushed to other buildings. There has been some water damage in there over the years. So what we would propose is to sell the property as is. I've included some information for the board on the overall size of the lot, the square footage, and then worked with our communications department to put together a advertisement to send out for website, newspaper, social media to accept bids. In the last couple of weeks, we did receive a message from someone who is interested in buying the property and converting it into a single family home. So this will also go back to them. I pulled policy just to double check what is in our board policy on how to sell the property. In our policy, it does say via resolution. However, there are no state statutes that require a formal resolution to be made. So I believe that you could just take a formal action and a formal motion. And then the best method, this is from our policy, the best method of disposing of the properties will be selected. This may be by advertising, public auction, sealed bids, or negotiation. This determination will be reached after consulting with the board. So what I'm coming to ask is, do we have permission to advertise the sale of the building, if that is kosher by the board? The second would be for that advertisement to run for 2 weeks, with a request of sealed bids to be submitted to me. I will then bring it to the July 22nd meeting where you can open and make formal action of if you would like to sell that property, and then go ahead and get that hopefully closed before July 1st, because as of July 1st with Senate Bill 113, there are new requirements that approval has to go through the state to sell the building prior to that process being completed. So it would save time on our part if we could move forward with it. So that's what I'm here asking for, and it looks like Dr. D has questions.
So July 22nd will be the June 22nd.
I'm so sorry, June 22nd before the July 1st meeting.
Which is a short fuse, relatively speaking.
Yes, we have some movement that needs to happen for sure. I'll work with legal to also draft an agreement for the sale as well, once we kind of have an idea of what that acceptance or that sealed bid process might look like.
The law changing that expedient for us, if ever, this is a good time.
I know this is beyond this, but do we have other properties that are sort of similar to this, or is this pretty much it?
This is the only one I'm aware of. That is a closed school that we still own. Theone would have been the only other, and that sold several years ago. I'm told that the several times that the board has tried to sell this property, they haven't had any luck. So with having an opportunity of a buyer that is interested, I'd really like to get that message out and really get it advertised and see if we can get a couple of competitive bids so that the board could move on. We do currently cover the total property in about $2.2 million policy to cover the lot, building, and complete contents. So there would be a savings to the district as well.
How much does that coverage cost this year?
I don't have a premium on that individual building. But I could get that to you.
There's actually stuff stored in there.
I mean, the policy is, you know, 2.2 million on a $365 million policy for all of our buildings, so. What did you say about?
There's
What?
actually stuff stored in there.
There are, so there's some desks, some science tables, old turf from one of the previous fields. There's a lot of.
Variety.
Huh.
It says
Yep.
here if you'd like it to.
Yeah. I've been up there several times recently, and there's a pretty good population of
Pigeons,
birds,
yes,
too,
yes. If you go there, you need a pigeon net, you know, a hard hat.
So those come with it apparently.
Yeah.
as is.
Yep, the smell is pretty top notch too.
Does the board feel like we've had enough information to go through the motion tonight? And I kind of tried to know what you said within the motion. Permission to advertise the sale. Something about 2 weeks. I didn't write my notes. The
So,
deadline within 2 weeks,
yep,
and then, the requirement of sealed bids or the way it will be. You
You'll
worded it much
need-
better than my notes.
you'll need a motion that essentially says that the friend property is declared surplus by the board. And that you wish to proceed with advertising acceptance of sealed bids for 2 weeks. You got that?
So moved.
Okay. I like that. There's a second.
Question
Yes,
first.
go ahead.
Do we still have the opportunity if we decide to reject the sealed bids or once we put it out? Are we tied into taking it?
No, I believe the board, if you're not happy with what sealed bids you have accepted, that you are not required to accept one of those bids. You can reject all bids and rebid it out or decide to not sell the property.
Can you explain a little bit about what's gonna change after July 1st?
So basically with Senate Bill 113, let me get my notes out. I have a full email.
Include this in discussion if we go to the
Yes.
second.
I'm sorry.
That would make me more
Sorry.
comfortable.
I'll have a second.
Okay.
Okay.
Include this in discussion.
So it allows the state the first right of refusal. So within 30 days after the Board of Education of a school district adopts a resolution to dispose of a school district building, the Board of Education shall submit a written notice of its intention to dispose of such building to the legislator. Such notice must be filed with the chief clerk of the House of Representatives and the Secretary of the Senate and shall contain the following. A description of the school district's use of such building immediately prior to the decision to dispose of the building. The reason such building's disuse and decision to dispose of such building. And 3, the legal description of the real property to be disposed of. 4, a copy of the resolution adopted by the board. And then if it's received by legislative during a regular legislative session, then the legislator shall have 45 days to adopt a concurrent resolution in accordance with the subsection stating that the legislator's intention for the state to acquire such building. If the notice is received when the legislator is not in regular session, then the legislator shall have 45 days from the commencement of the next regular session to adopt a concurrent resolution in accordance with subsection C.
Then there's a bunch of other verbiage. Like this is a huge paragraph, so I apologize. Upon adoption of a concurrent resolution in accordance with subsection C, the state named in such resolution shall have 180 days to complete the acquisition of such school district building and take title to the real property. The school district shall not sell, gift, lease, or otherwise conveys each building of the real property described in the written notice. Basically, we can't take any action until we have written agreements from the state to sell the property. So it just lengthens out the process. So, I mean, you're looking at another 6 months on that process, and who knows if a buyer is gonna stay with us through that entire process.
State decides they want it, do they buy it from the district or they just acquire it?
I think they just say, you can't sell it.
They're not, the state's not taking over the property. They just determine whether the school district can get rid of it or not?
Yep.
Right. Oh,
There's, yeah, 2 school districts in that, 2 families, Nemaha Central and Central Plains, who in the last couple of years, the board has voted to close a building and then try to sell it. And people got, their local legislators to get this into SB 113s to prevent them from selling those buildings or closing down schools. So like Wilson Elementary School or Central Plains is voting, I think, August 2nd to vote to close it. That's part of this legislation, is to not allow them, that the legislature would have to approve them closing that building before they could sell it. Wow.
Hence why I'm here asking, I'm just like, can we avoid all of that? That would be great.
We have a motion. Any more questions? Concerns? Still reading.
Oh, I'm good. I'm just reading Colleen's notes here.
He's lost in that Senate bill verbiage because it's
Yeah,
just
still processing.
so entertaining.
You answered the only question I had. We can reject.
I guess all in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. There are several. Okay, we're ready for board open discussion.
Don't have much except to say I was pleased to see a pretty good field of folks that have filed to run for school board. So that's encouraging. Like 10 at least.
10, yes, sir.
10,
Yeah, so that's good.
good future.
That's all I have.
Jackie?
I think I'm good. Let's continue with negotiations tomorrow evening.
I don't have anything.
Dr. Dominguez?
We started summer school today. We have teacher appreciation at the wind game this Thursday. If you get a chance to come out, all you gotta do is show your ID and you get yourself and one guest in. So that'll be good. Really pleasantly surprised in a good way that many students are going to nationals. Anytime you engage the student, you engage the family, and then the family maybe even get to make that trip. And nationals, the girls going to second at state in wrestling, getting coaches program. I mean, once again, if you offer it, the child gets engaged, and that engages the family, and that engages the whole community, and that just makes Garden City a better place to be. So very excited about where we're at.
Well, we have a couple of executive sessions. We don't have an board meeting notes. We're good at that. The next meeting of the Board of Education will take place on Thursday, June 22nd at 5 p.m. in the board meeting room.
For the first executive session, I was kind of thinking, Colleen.
Let's try for 20 minutes.
Okay.
I want Josh in there too, sir. I don't know if Josh is.
Okay. Okay, well, Madam President, I move that we go into executive session for 20 minutes, you said?
Yes.
Starting at 1 minute after 8.
Yes.
Okay, 5 minutes after 8. I thought someone would say something.
Yeah.
And ending 25 after 8. And that I would also invite Colleen Dries, Jason Johnson, Dr. Dominguez, and Josh into that executive session.
Second. Okay, all in favor, aye? Aye.
Aye.
Okay.